Julie, it's great to be with you again. Nice to catch up. And I've been following you for a long time. And what I really like is that for the last several months, I know one of your key messages, now solidified in your new book, which I'd love to hear more about, is around how we've got to maintain eye contact, how we can optimize the video experience while we're selling. What a timely topic. It's not definitely not going to go anywhere anytime soon. It's something that I think we've realized as we flex this new muscle, some of the benefits of being able to sell with video, even as we start to reopen or go back to a lot more face to face. This isn't going to go anywhere. And so there's a lot of benefits to it. You have some very unique thoughts on how to leverage video as a medium for meetings, for selling. And I'd love to hear what's top of mind for you right now around using video as a sales platform.
Oh gosh, you mentioned a bunch of things that are top of mind, but like you said, like the genie's not going back in the bottle, right? We've found a way to communicate, and many times more efficiently, especially at the start of the sales process. And it's just going to continue to evolve and probably be a part of our lives. So it's really important to understand how to master this, because what we've been doing is, a lot of people turned on their camera and just continued to do what they did when they were in person. And we're finding that that's why people are feeling so disconnected virtually. Like we're technically connected, but we are not, buyers aren't feeling engaged. That's why they don't have their camera on. They want the opportunity to check out because they know it's going to be, a whole call if somebody's staring at their desk, and it's just not, and it's not a good experience. So my focus is really, and the focus in the book is how do we take this medium and make it as close to an in-person experience as possible. And to do that, you have to really understand that this is a new medium, right? Uh, and it's much like, I've been in sales my whole life, but I also worked as a professional actor. And when I went from working live theater to working in front of the camera, I went to my first audition, and I tried to do the same thing I did in the theatrical audition. They were like, "Whoa, what are you doing?" Right? That's not going to work. And I did what actors do when they want to work in a new medium, is took some on-camera classes. And so I learned that, the camera reads things very differently. So we have to adjust to that, because many of the things we were able to communicate very easily in person are either lost or miscommunicated on camera.
That's a great analogy, specifically transitioning, because that's what we're all doing as sellers, is we're
Right.
happy to transition into this new medium. And it's not comfortable for all. Using some of these tools, the digital tools, it's not comfortable for a lot of folks because, let's face it, we're used to a certain way of doing things. And when that changes, it requires us to pivot practically everything about what we're doing. The way we approach it, how we truly connect with the buyer. Their experience is so critical to the whole thing. We've got to make sure that they feel connected, as you said. Um,
Absolutely.
and I would say as well, I've got a gentleman that I work with who talks about, when we show up, and I'm curious as to your thoughts on this. When we
Hmm.
show up to a meeting with a customer, and, I think a lot of people take kind of a wait and see approach to, am I going to turn on my camera today, this or that? And if the customer doesn't, they don't, right?
Hmm.
Um, I've got a gentleman that I work with who says you might as well be showing up to that with a paper bag on your head, because you're basically shutting off that possibility to optimize the connection. And it's thought provoking, because the reality is, even if they don't show up, the buyer that is, with their camera on, I see the merits in coming to the table, leading with camera. And the reason why is because it shows you're ready for the meeting, you're
Hmm.
willing and able and want to forge that connection as strongly as you can. And the
Right.
other thing too is you can show a lot of those intangibles that you wouldn't be able to show just on a regular call, like that I'm paying attention, like maybe that I'm taking notes. And I will even state that if I'm clacking away, I'll say, pardon me, I'm taking some notes. I just didn't want you to think I was rude or distracted. Sometimes I'll even make that statement because I want to make sure that they feel that I'm invested in this. What are your
Right.
thoughts on
Right.
how should we be showing up with video in these sales meetings to make the buyer feel as connected as possible, in your opinion?
Yeah. Well, to your friend's point, uh, there is. no reason to do a virtual call if you're not going to have your video on. And I think that excuse that, well, my buyer doesn't have their video on, that doesn't matter. It's not about your comfort. It's about the buyer still experiences everything that, the value of feeling like they're sitting across from you. So you're basically taking that away because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk to a camera when there's no one there. It is as close to acting as salespeople are going to get, and yet we throw salespeople into this world without any skills around how to do that. I mean, even as an actor, you learn how to have a dynamic conversation when you can't see the other person. Now, that's a really important skill that we need, whether we're talking to a buyer that doesn't have their camera on, or perhaps we're making recordings that we're sending to customers that they're going to watch. And so, not only do we need to be on camera and, like you said, show that we're attentive or listening, uh, but we need to show up well because, you're showing up and you're letting your customer know, I'm going to take notes, and that's what I'm doing when I'm looking down. But most people are showing up and they're doing, what most people do, which is they're looking at this person's image on their screen, which if you're, pouring out your deepest, darkest secrets to me and your problems, and I'm looking down at your screen, my screen, it's the equivalent of being face to face and like looking at your shoes or your phone. It's just, that's the feeling. And so we have to understand what the buyer's experience is on the other side of the screen. And so many of us are not thinking about that. We're making excuses for ourselves, or we're saying, "Oh, the customer knows I'm looking at their image." Well, do they? Is it their job to make an excuse for you? I don't think that's their first priority. All they know is how it feels, and relationships are built on emotion, not logic. I'm not going to explain away your behavior for you.
That's a great call out, Julie, because I think, look, I'm a big probability and propensity type of person. I'm always thinking about how can I create the environment that's going to be most conducive to moving forward, whether that's
Right.
getting a next meeting, whether that's creation of and nurturing of a relationship, whether it's, planning strategy together. These are all things that are very personal to the customer. They care a great deal about that. And that's why anything that you can do, whether they reciprocate or not, anything that you can do to make that a more conducive environment to doing what you're endeavoring to do is going to give you a leg up. It's going to give you a higher
Absolutely.
probability of things moving forward in the way that you want. I'm curious because I know you work with a lot of sellers. What are some of the other big mistakes that you see sellers making on video today?
Well, certainly that lack of eye contact, which is huge. I don't think people realize the importance of that, because that is one of the quickest ways to build a relationship with someone. I mean, relationship experts say we should be making eye contact face to face about 2/3 of the time. Well, I think it's more on video, because if you're not looking at me by looking in the camera, I don't know what you're looking at, because we don't have this shared environment. So it could be your phone, it could be, but to me, it feels like you're disengaged, right? So that's a big problem. The other thing is, I see salespeople showing up on video, and this is the sort of the equivalent of having a bag over your head, um, and they just approach it. They don't understand that, in this 20% of your body or 15% of your body that your customer can see, you have to communicate everything that you were able to do in person. And so many people show up with this, sort of flat demeanor. It's a very, you look around any virtual call and you see everybody just like this. They have what I call resting business face. And it is a face that,
I
right?
like, yes, I like that.
It's familiar, right? We
Yeah.
that's and we see that in customers, and we panic, but it really is, it's how we have been trained to sit in front of a screen, right? We are we're more in a receiving mode. So that's how our audience looks. But we can't always control that. But as a salesperson, when we show up like that and we say, well, this is going to save you $100,000, and my face looks like I just asked you to pass the salt. It's like, I would say, if your face has nothing to say, why do you have your camera on? Right? I mean, this is why we have video, folks, so we can communicate effectively. So we have to make sure that we're using all our tools, because there is not much going on for people to be engaged with on most virtual calls. If you're just very wooden and your face has nothing to say and your voice has little variety and you're just talking and not interacting, it's no wonder buyers have their cameras off.
I think when you're on video, there's also that intangible element within you that I just naturally feel more engaged in that conversation. There's zero
Yes.
temptation for me when I'm on video to do anything else or think about anything else or like start checking email because I know they're looking right at me. So
Right,
by
right.
default, I feel like there is an added element of I'm even more focused on those calls. So even if it's for that sake alone, I feel there's a strong value and making sure that you have videos so that you're optimally engaged. Obviously they see you as connected as possible, and it is the best we can do in today's day and age very often in order to forge and nurture that relationship and move it
Yeah.
forward.
Yeah.
Um, we touched on some of this, but it's challenging when, sure, I can go out and I can show up every single call on video and I can do everything I can or try to do to pull the customer really into the dialogue. But, how do you connect with them when they don't have their video on? How can you get them to interact more?
Yeah, well, sort of two parts to that. I think when, connecting with someone who's not on video is, like I said, it's part acting. It's actually, visualizing that person in the camera, because the camera is a lie detector. So if you're sort of just talking generally and you're thinking, oh, I can't really see this person, your eyes are going to look kind of dead and they're kind of wander around. And our eyes are, we can see very specifically direction of your eyes and what's going on in your eyes. So it's important to develop the skill of really being able to see the person in your camera as a real person, and not just see them, as a static figure, but as somebody who's dynamically involved in the conversation. So, for instance, if we were having a conversation and I said something, interesting, I would imagine you going, "Huh." Right? Because what happens is, on video, when someone else doesn't have their video on, we've lost that natural communication loop where we say something and we get feedback, right? Now, we don't get any feedback. We don't even get those little nonverbal signals where somebody nods or even says, huh, because of the nature of the two-way microphone. So what I recommend, and what works really well, is just to imagine that, they're still there. Just because we can't see them doesn't mean they're there, they're not there, or they're sitting there very judgmentally going, what does she know? Right? Which is where many salespeople go. They go to the deepest, darkest place, right? But to imagine that if I say something interesting, they're probably going, huh. And then that gives me energy to continue, like, yeah, so here's what we're going to do, et cetera, et cetera. And maybe I say something funny, and, so I pause, because it's a real conversation. Just because the other person's part is silent doesn't mean we're not having a conversation. So it's being able to get comfortable with that. And then also, to your point about interaction, uh, many times, especially when the other person is not on camera, we don't leave room for that interaction. And that's why you hear so many people just talk, 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 talk. It's one run-on sentence after the other in sales, because we're so afraid that nobody's listening. And if I stop, they're not going to say anything. It's going to be awkward. And so developing that ability to trust that someone is there, pause, put a period at the end of your sentence, stop, and keep looking at the camera, because, like, to your point, when you feel more responsible because you're on video, if I see someone looking at me and they ask me a question, I am much more likely to answer it than if they're looking down here. I mean, it's the simplest trick, and it makes the hugest difference to just, when you ask a question, look at the camera and hold it there. Because every person on that call, even if you have, 20 people, they all feel like you're talking to them, because video is a very personal medium, as opposed to kind of, I hear a lot of salespeople throw questions out that, first of all, don't sound like questions. It's like, and how's that working for you today? It's like, I'm sorry, was there a question in there? Like, there's no question words. There's no uptick at the end of the sentence. They're looking down. They're not waiting for an answer. So that's why we get these run-on conversations that buyers are like, oh my gosh, it was a fire hose, right?
What do you tell sellers that are either intimidated by video or, we've got this whole other camp, Julie, that's been doing conference calls for a long time that has
Mhm.
had no video component. They feel like they've done just fine without it. Maybe they're not 100% sold on the concept. I mean, I'm of the school of thought that because we can't do the face to face, it has to replace that or as best it can in those situations. And there's a ton of benefits to it. I've actually seen a couple of things. One with the quality of the platforms that offer virtual meetings, they've exponentially offered more features, more functionality. They've done things to intentionally make it more inclusive, even adding backgrounds. Like, you can get a good sense of a lot of people with the benefit of like having a background on there that, speaks to their passions, right? I
Right,
think
right.
these can be used as conversation starters. So, but I'm curious, what do you tell somebody that maybe they're just like, I don't feel comfortable going on video on these situations, or hey, I've been
Not
doing this for
necessary.
20
Yeah,
years. It's
I'm
not
I'm doing
necessary.
fine.
Yeah.
Right, right. Well, here's the thing. There are certain qualities that need to be present to build a relationship. And that's, kind of if you believe that relations are important to sales, then you need to pay attention to that. And as several of them are things like, credibility, empathy, active listening, interest in the other person. And those are very hard. You're asking a lot for your words to carry all those qualities, right? When when here we have a camera, and just by the fact that you're looking at me, I feel like you are friendly. I feel like you are more honest because direct eye contact is associated with, telling the truth. It releases a hormone that helps. It's called oxytocin. Some people call it the love hormone, but it makes me feel connected to you. So, and I see your body language, which makes me see you as a real person. For so long in sales, we were like, "Oh, I wish my customer could see me as a real person and we could meet." Well, here we are. Here's your chance. I wish they could get to know me. Well, here's my background. Gee, we're on a more equal status. So all kinds of good reasons, but I know that some people are still, nervous about it, or they don't feel comfortable. And what I say is there is nothing natural about talking on camera. So I get it. And that's why I wrote a book about it, because we have thrown salespeople into this world without the tools to understand that it's awkward, and how do I feel natural in this artificial environment? Uh, and so there's some steps that you can take, the first one is really you have to make friends with your camera. Like your camera, a lot of people see their camera as the enemy, like, oh, I got to be on camera. And the thing is, the camera reads feelings. It will read whatever's on your face, and if there's some discomfort or awkwardness or uncertainty, your customer won't know why they're getting some, vibe from you or something's off, but they'll just know that you weren't quite congruent, and that can affect your relationship and your sales. So getting comfortable in front of the camera and just realizing this is the lens through which you're going to connect with your audience. So you better look at it as a friendly entity and just start having those conversations with your camera. I would say just, record yourself a couple minutes every day, just like, hey, camera. So here's what I have planned today. This feels really stupid talking to you, but we have to break that conception we had of our camera as the enemy.
I love that. And it's one of those things where, even if somebody has embraced every component of the camera, right? Like, we talked about the backgrounds, leveraging it, looking into the camera directly. Even if somebody has embraced every element, I think you've given our viewers today that additional insight of all the more reason to reinforce why they're doing it and maybe even how to do it differently. The
Yeah.
last thing I wanted to ask you about, Julie, was the book itself. First
Mhm.
off, love the title. Very
Thank you.
inspired. What was the motivation? Obviously, you saw a need, and I personally I love the fact that you make so many analogies to your career in acting to this. I make a lot of sports analogies, but I can't think of any really good sports analogies other than you probably show off more sometime for the camera than you do when you're just playing a pickup game. But I think what I'm interested in is what prompted you to, where'd you get the title from, and then also what prompted you to tackle this topic?
Yeah, it was interesting when the pandemic first struck and I saw all these salespeople just struggling with the same thing I faced when I was an actor going into on camera work. I was like, oh my gosh, nobody has these tools. Like, of course. And so I put together a video course to just quickly, give salespeople some expertise on here's how you make eye contact, here's how you read body language while you're making eye contact, and here's how you share screens and still stay connected. So all the basics. And then I was, of course, coaching tons of salespeople in organizations. And from that, I learned, just through these, hundreds of conversations with salespeople, getting them in front of a camera, just all their, insecurities and questions and really the driving issue that came out of that was, some of the key issues was I just feel so disconnected from people. I'm not connecting. People are, customers are so passive on video. How do I build a relationship? And so the book really came out of those conversations, like addressing all those questions that salespeople have. That there's a lot of advice floating around, and much of it is from people who've never worked on camera, and it's not great. And so people are kind of you know taping together a style, and right now a lot of people are just reinforcing bad habits and not necessarily getting better on camera, though they may be more comfortable. So the book really came out of that, and the title, I have to give credit to my good friend Lisa Dennis, who's a sales expert. You may know her as
Oh, yeah.
well. Does a lot of work with value propositions. We were brainstorming, and she was like, "What is it? What are you trying to? What's the something we really just grab people's attention? What's it about?" It's like, look me in the eye. I mean, that says everything about, stop looking at the screen, stop acting like it's okay to not behave like a human being sitting across from each other, and learn the skills that you need to build a relationship. And so that's what it is. It's my attempt to really fill that gap that I think has existed since the beginning of the pandemic, that we've
Yeah.
thrown a lot of tools and technology at, but we've forgot this foundational step of, oh, by the way, how do you connect with someone through the camera?
Right.
And we're a
No, I love
little late to the party, but we're getting there.
I mean, that's half the thing, right? Because a lot of times as sellers, we get thrown into these new circumstances and we're just, we have to adapt. We have to be chameleons to the new
Right.
environment and understand the parameters at play and how to optimize them. And
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've just taken on what in my mind is probably one of the bigger ones, but it's one that not a lot of people are talking about, at least not enough.
It's
There isn't enough.
surprising, yeah.
It
Yeah,
is.
it should be front and center, and yet I think people are like, "Well, it's good enough." It's like, "Is it though?" Like, because, the bar is gonna continue to rise, and some people are gonna get really good at this, by the way,
Yeah.
your competitors, perhaps. And in a hybrid world, you're gonna be competing with some vendors who are able to see your customer live. Now, if you can't hold up to that, that's gonna be a problem. So it is time. It's more than time to embrace it. And I know it's awkward. I know it's just another thing you have to learn, but it will give you so much more freedom too. I mean, my goal is not to make salespeople's life more complicated. It's like to give you the freedom to express yourself in this unnatural space.
Why go into a situation as a seller with two hands tied behind your back, right? And if you embrace it, you're going to have a higher probability of doing what you're setting out to do, which is, to your point, having that relationship, making sure that they feel more comfortable working with you, that they view you as genuine and authentic. And no better way to be transparent than to give them that window into your home office or your background or whatever may have you. I couldn't agree more.
Right.
So,
Right.
Julie, thanks so much. Anything else that you would want to tell sellers before we sign off today?
No, I would just say, if you're, doubting of your skills or wondering if you can better, just, check out the book. Look at the table of contents. I cover, like, if you've thought of the question, I probably cover it. Like, how do I use two screens? How do I work with a producer? How do I evaluate my own videos? So you don't have to do this alone. There's no reason why you need to figure it out on your own, because the whole industry has already figured this out. And I've just applied that to sales. So I hope that people will take advantage of it.
Fantastic. Well, Julie, thank you so much. I can't wait to check out the book, and appreciate our time today.
Oh, thanks, Carson. It's been a pleasure.